Good evening and welcome to the Genesis Science Report. Tonight, we'll challenge one of the most commonly used arguments for human evolution, the claim that human chromosome number 2 is proof of a common ancestor with apes. Dr. J. Wile will reveal why the actual genetic evidence raises some serious doubts about this theory. Later, we'll explore a fascinating hypothesis. Did the discovery of dinosaur fossils lead people to reject the Bible? Well, we'll be joined by paleontology expert Joseph Hubbard as he takes us through the real history and explains why fossils don't disprove Genesis, they affirm it. But first, generations ago, planetary alignment was a concept reserved for the realms of scientists and stargazers, often dismissed by many as mere celestial coincidence. Yet, as the universe spins on its axis, the tables are turning, and fascination with planetary alignment is somehow making a resurgence. Space, after all, it is pretty inspiring, and that's why painters like Vincent van Gogh, creator of the famous oil painting Starry Night, once said, quote, "For my part, I know nothing with any certainty, but the sight of the stars makes me dream." As the last significant planetary parade occurred in early 2025, I hope you too can dream and set your sights on the incredible night sky. Now, planetary alignment is this term that is perhaps not the most correct. It brings connotations of astrological divination when all of the planets are in alignment for things to be good or bad in your life. So more correct would be to call what we're seeing a planetary parade. And these are not necessarily rare, but the ability to see 7 planets in the night sky does not happen very often. Our naked eye can usually only spot Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. However, their lineup remains a breathtaking display. Now, this event is part of a natural cycle, but after 2025, we may have to wait several more years for another event of this magnitude. So why does it matter? Well, the science behind the relative position of the planets reveals not only a visual spectacle, but also offers opportunities to enhance our understanding of the solar system and beyond. Now, true alignments can actually slightly influence solar activity due to the gravitational interactions. And historically, alignments have enabled efficient spacecraft travel, notably in NASA's Voyager missions, which utilize these gravitational slingshots to get to different planets more quickly. So throughout history, the motions of the planets have been quite wrongfully worshipped, and various cultures have placed this great significance on heavenly bodies. You know, the ancient Egyptians aligned their pyramids northward to connect deceased pharaohs with the celestial North Pole, while the Babylonians meticulously recorded planetary movements to predict when celestial events would happen in the future. Similarly, if you remember a few years ago, the Mayans and the North American natives created observatories and calendars based on celestial observations. This was a huge deal with the Mayan calendar, and the study of the heavens is to be admired. But that's the study of the heavens, not the worship of the heavens. You know, even today we find ourselves at a crossroads where science and spirituality converge. As more individuals develop an interest in astronomy, the fascination with these celestial events intensifies. However, as we gaze upon the heavens, we have to remember our Creator. Just as Isaiah states, "Lift up your eyes on high, and behold, who hath created these things, that bringeth out their host by number. He calls them all by names," is what the Bible says, "by the greatness of his might." So indeed, the upcoming planetary parade invites us to reflect on the magnificence of God and the beauty of the universe, including every created planet and bright star. But more importantly, it reminds us to align our lives and our values with a higher purpose, that of the Creator of heaven and earth. You know, in a chaotic world, looking up at the night sky sometimes connects us, and it reminds us of a powerful God who has crafted the intricate design of not only the vast cosmos, but also our individual lives. I'm David Rives, and this is the Genesis Science Report. The birds of the air, they were created by God in the beginning, but they are so diverse right now. He is being handed this magnificent creature.
This bird is designed. He is chock full of design. This doesn't just happen. He'll fly over your head and he'll land and you can't hear a thing.
Is that right?
It's incredible. God thought of everything when He made them.
On Wonders Without Number. Friends of Genesis Science Network, we started this channel to make an impact in the lives of both Christians and inquiring skeptics around the world. It has done that in unbelievable ways. Now, one of our viewers wrote, "I've been watching your channel for nearly a week now, and I would like you to know the blessing that it's been to me. I've never had the finances or the opportunity to attend a university, but I've been a believer for the last 37 years. Your channel has done more for my understanding of my faith than any book I've read save the Bible, and I feel like I'm finally able to attend the lecture classes I've always wanted to. Thank you so much for your ministry." I want to thank you for your generous support. GSN is no simple project and requires monthly commitments to keep it on the air. Please consider becoming a partner with us today. Just call 931-212-7990 or click Give on our website. We are making a difference. I'm David Rives, and you're watching the Genesis Science Network. Welcome back to the report. It is time to tackle a viewer question in our Genesis Science Q&A. This week, our question comes from Daniel Daly in Lebanon, Pennsylvania. He wrote in saying, "First, thank you so much for your ministry. I greatly enjoy it. God bless you. Second, I'm a born-again Bible believer, six-day creation, humans and dinosaurs live together, Christian. Regarding fossils, can you provide any thoughts on how many fossils there are of dinosaurs versus mammals like elephants, giraffes, horses, bears, etc.? It would make sense if there are just as many mammals as dinosaurs, I think, but I never hear anyone talk about mammal fossils. Thank you." Thank you, Daniel, for that question. All right, so let's think about it for a second. Actually, if you look at the difference between dinosaur fossils and mammal fossils, while mammal fossils are prevalent, and we do find a lot of them, we find a ton of dinosaur fossils. So why is there this huge difference between the number of dinosaurs versus the number of mammals? Well, let's think about it for a second. The dinosaurs were probably living in lowland or swampy areas, okay? So in those swampy areas, those would have been close to the boundaries of probably a pre-flood supercontinent. Well, what that means is that when the fountains of the great deep break open and the windows of heaven are open and there are tremendous amounts of sediments being washed across the pre-flood ocean basins in tsunami-like waves carrying these sediments, right? Well, then, boom, the dinosaurs get buried very quickly once those muddy waves reach shore, all right? And so they get buried in these muddy conditions very quickly. Well, all of the mammals are, of course, they don't know what to do. They're traveling further inland. They're going to higher lands, which means that as the waters are rising, and this is a year-long event of the flood. So in those first 6 months, as the waters are rising and things are just being buried rapidly, very, very rapidly, well, there comes a point when the mammals can't get to any higher ground. So at that point, they are buried, many of them. But these are in these top layers. So in the top layers of the fossil record, you finally got all of the mammal bones. All right, so a lot of mammal bones were not as well preserved because they weren't buried under as much sediment, which means that the water, that the moisture wasn't compressed out, that heat and pressure didn't help form the fossils as much. So they weren't as well preserved. Some of them decayed. Some of them were on higher layers, but then as the floodwaters started to decrease, Well, guess what? A lot of those higher layers were actually washed away. And if you go to YouTube, David Rives Ministries, we have, I think, over 600 videos up there. And you can look, why no human fossils? And it tackles the question of why we don't find human fossils, because humans are technically mammals with mammary glands. So that means that we don't find a whole lot of humans. We don't find a tremendous amount of other types of mammals, but there's a huge good reason for that, and it's a biblical reason. If you look at the secular interpretation that humans have been around in some form or another for several 100,000 years, that mammals have been around for millions of years, evolving, well, then we should see a tremendous amount of mammal fossils in the fossil record, and we simply don't. But you know what we find more than dinosaurs? We've already determined that there are more dinosaurs than there are mammals typically found. They're better preserved. There's a whole lot more marine creatures and marine fossils from the bottom layers of the fossil record all the way to the top than any other type of fossil. And what does that mean? That means that there was a massive catastrophic event, a watery event that buried first all of the sea creatures in the ocean basins. Then it brought a lot of those sea creatures up as it's burying the dinosaurs, which is the reason you find marine fossils with dinosaurs. And then it brought a lot of those sea creatures up as it's burying the mammals, which is the reason that, again, within those layers that we find mammals, we also find sea creatures. There's one common thing, and that is a massive catastrophic flood. We love connecting with you, our viewers, so remember to keep those questions coming. Now, you can share them with us on social media or email comments at genesissciencenetwork.com. And now, if you've ever wondered what fossils really tell us about Earth's history, I want you to check out this week's featured resource, Fossils: Description and Interpretation. Now, in this book, author and creation science researcher J.D. Mitchell presents a groundbreaking fossil guide written from a biblical worldview. This incredible resource challenges evolutionary interpretations and instead reveals how fossils serve as this powerful reminder of God's judgment, power, and grace. Inside, you're going to find nearly 250 fossils described and interpreted through the lens of biblical creation. Insights into trilobites and ammonites and pterosaurs and dinosaur fossils, and so much more. Over 240 full-color photographs and artistic sketches. A unique breakdown of the 18 facts of paleontology that supports the Genesis flood. And I'll just have to tell you, when I was young, I picked up a fossil identification guide for kids. And I was faced with all of these evolutionary narratives, all of these things about millions and millions of years and how old everything was. It was inserted artificially into the book without evidence. So unlike mainstream fossil guides, I wish I had this. This book offers an alternative perspective, one that aligns with both science and scripture. Whether you're a student, or whether you're a fossil collector, or simply curious about the truth behind these ancient remains, Fossils: Description and Interpretation is a must-have resource. And you can find your copy by visiting the Creation Superstore online at creationsuperstore.com. Welcome to the Kids Corner. Can you read this? Check this out. This is a very well-known Bible passage, but written in a language that most of us can't read, can't understand. What you're looking at in one of these verses is a John 3:16 written in the Native American language of Navajo. Now, did you know that until just a few hundred years ago, most people couldn't read in any language? Well, it was because of a desire to read the Bible that most people started learning how to read and write. The original Bible languages were Hebrew in the Old Testament and Greek in the New Testament, but if you spoke a different language, you would need a translation from the original Hebrew and Greek. Well, in the last few hundred years, the Bible has been translated into more than 3,600 different languages, which includes all of the major spoken languages. Today, there are many dedicated people working on translations into even more languages. Many of these languages use an entirely different set of characters than what we use in America right here. For instance, the Cherokee language has 86 different characters in their alphabet. Other languages use scripts that look almost like scribbles to me, and if you'll notice, a lot of these characters on the page, they have all of these accent marks. But you know what? They would be perfectly readable to someone who learned this language. Today, more people around the world are able to read the Bible in their own language than ever before, and the Bible is available in far more languages than any other book. So if someone told you that they could speak, read, and understand 10 completely different languages, well, you might be impressed. I would be impressed. But did you ever stop to think that God, as the creator of all language, understands every language, every dialect known to man? This includes all of the 7,139 languages that are currently known, plus any that we are yet to create. So no matter what language we speak, we read, or we pray in, God is able to fully understand us perfectly, no translation needed. Coming up, one of the most cited pieces of genetic evidence for human evolution is the supposed fusion of chromosome 2. But does the actual DNA evidence support this claim, or is there a better explanation that actually fits within a biblical model? Dr. Jay Wile joins us after the break to break it all down for us, so stay tuned. Limestone, we see it all around the world, but what is it exactly and how did it get here?
But let's delve a little bit into limestone. This was found by our good friend John Mackay, our mutual friend John Mackay, a few years back, right? He was driving through the Peak District and he shouted, "Stop!" And he said, "I've seen limestone." And the driver was like, "We're in the middle of the Peak District, it's all limestone around here." No, I found some special limestone.
On Wonders Without Number.
Join us at the Wonder Center and Science Museum for this month's Unwrapped event, where we feature expert speakers presenting scientific and biblical discoveries.
It pays to learn history, folks.
We cannot create an aircraft even close to what these birds can do.
This changes the way we do biology.
Discounted tickets are available for an after-hours adventure, including museum admission with kids' hands-on activities, a planetarium movie, Tesla experience, and pre-show entertainment. Perfect for the whole family.
What you believe about the history of the world is going to affect the way that you study the world today.
You see a mathematical order here. You see the orthogonal lines. You see the repeating patterns.
You don't understand what it takes to make a cell. That's serious engineering.
Come be inspired as you learn. The evening presentation is free, but seating is extremely limited, so RSVP immediately at wondercenter.org.
Squids in limestone in the middle of the Grand Canyon.
But the big problem is, how did those fossils get deposited in the middle of a 7-foot thick layer? According to the narrative, is something like 36 million years in duration. I'm replacing the narrative with some type of rapid smothering event.
On Wonders Without Number. Welcome back to the report. One of the most commonly cited pieces of genetic evidence for human evolution is human chromosome 2. Evolutionists claim that humans and apes share a common ancestor and that at some point in the past, 2 ancestral ape chromosomes somehow fused together, giving humans 23 pairs of chromosomes instead of 24. Now, this argument is often presented as irrefutable proof of human evolution, but does the actual genetic evidence support this claim? Or is there a better explanation for why human chromosome 2 looks the way it does? To help us break this down, we're joined by Dr. Jay Wile. Now, Dr. Wile holds a PhD in nuclear chemistry from the University of Rochester. He's won several awards for excellence in teaching, is an international speaker, and he's published more than 30 articles in peer-reviewed scientific literature. He's best known for his award-winning K-12 science textbooks, which have been translated into Korean, Chinese, French, and Afrikaans. Dr. Wile, welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
It is great to have you on. Listen, evolutionists and especially skeptics love to claim that human chromosome 2 is the result of a fusion event. What is their reasoning for this claim?
Well, the main reasoning is if you look at human chromosome 2, there are two centromeres. A centromere is a pinched down part of the chromosome, and every chromosome has one. And it plays an important role when the cell divides. But this chromosome has two centromeres. And so one way you could get two centromeres is if two chromosomes fuse together. And then also, if you look at the genes on human chromosome 2, they look very similar to the genes that are on two different great ape chromosomes.
Okay.
So the idea is those two great ape chromosomes at some point came together and fused.
I got you. So is there actual genetic evidence then that would support the idea that the fusion hypothesis is correct?
Not really. I mean, when it was first discovered with two centromeres and so forth, the most obvious explanation was fusion. And chromosome fusion happens all the time. There's about 1 in 1,000 live births in the world where there's a chromosome fusion in humans. It's called a Robertsonian translocation. And so fusions they're rare but not uncommon. And so the obvious explanation was fusion. But when we started looking at more details, we found some things that didn't make sense. And the biggest thing that doesn't make sense is if you look at where the fusion is supposed to have happened, it's right on top of an active gene. And that doesn't make sense because fusion usually occurs on spots where the chromosome's not being used, or at least not being used to translate into a protein. And also those fusion events, in order for it to fuse on a gene, both of the chromosomes would have had to have that gene. So when the fusion occurred, it could fuse right on the gene. It'd have to be sort of on both. And that's pretty rare.
Interesting.
So in the end, at first you think, okay, two centromeres means fusion. But when you look at where the fusion is supposed to have taken place, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
So it's basically in the middle of a working gene with an expression and a function. So if chromosome 2, let's just say it was the result of fusion, does that provide strong evidence that apes and humans share a common ancestor?
Not really. And this is the thing. I remember when I read this first in Francis Collins' book, The Language of God, back in 2006. You know, he said it's hard to understand any other way this could have happened except if it happened during evolution. But the fact is, like I said, chromosome fusions happen all of the time. They're rare, but they still happen. And the problem is, if the chromosomes fused, you would need some way for that fusion to be passed down to all the ancestors. So you would have to have some time in which there was this tiny population that all had this fusion. Well, the Bible gives us a perfect time for that to happen.
Yeah.
When the flood occurred, if Noah's family had the fusion, it's going to pass down to everybody. And that makes so much more sense than some population evolving with this fusion, because there's not a natural bottleneck there. There's a natural bottleneck in human history, the flood.
That is recorded actually in history.
Recorded.
So Dr. Wile, that makes a lot more sense. So if we just say that the fusion might have occurred, then there is a biblical model that would explain that. But so many times I do hear that people will read a book, they'll read something that has become somewhat popular, and then all of a sudden everybody is talking about it. I can't tell you how many skeptics I've interfaced with that they want to point to chromosome 2 fusion and they're like, this is absolute proof of human evolution. Now, some people argue that the chromosome has 2 centromeres, which would suggest fusion, but you mentioned, is there another reason why this might be the case?
Yes, actually, sometimes chromosomes do develop a second centromere on their own. We actually have a name for them. They're called dicentric chromosomes. These are chromosomes who have two centromeres, but not the result of fusion. It usually happens as a result of a proofreading error when the DNA is copied. And so in the end, this centromere gets placed there as a part of the replication process, and it's not supposed to be there, but it's there anyway. It's not a deleterious thing. A lot of people have dicentric chromosomes. It's rare for them all to be passed on to all future generations, but once again, if we're in a bottleneck where Noah's family all had dicentric chromosomes, then it makes perfect sense why we'd all have dicentric chromosomes today, at least for number 2.
Absolutely. That does make a lot of sense. So this could potentially impact the creation versus evolution debate. One way or the other, it could point to this biblical model, but more than that, we could actually point back to genetic entropy, to the idea that we as humans and all life is sort of breaking down. There are mutations, there are occurrences that are happening that probably aren't the original intention when everything was very good, right?
Right. And, so chromosome fusion is certainly not the normal thing to happen. Even in humans, when it happens today, it's rare. So that's an example of, the curse, the fall of man causing the curse to cause these terrible things. One thing I would point out, though, is the creation model for this is better because even if it is a fusion event, one thing that's really odd about human chromosome 2 is if it's the fusion of 2 great ape chromosomes, you should be able to say, okay, this part of the chromosome came from the first great ape chromosome, and then this part came from the second, and that's how they fuse together. Well, if that's the case, then this part should contain the genes from the first great ape chromosome, and this part should contain the genes from the second. That's actually not the way it is. The genes are in different locations. So you can't just say, okay, I can clearly see 2 chromosomes put together to make this long list of genes. No, it's this long list of genes that's in a jumbled up order compared to what you would think of with chromosome fusion.
Absolutely. And some of this research, you have written an article which then you shared with us on the Creation Club website, and some of this is based on a friend, Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins' work, which kudos to him for doing all of this research in some of the genetic expressions of that. But as we close, I just have one more question. As a Christian, how should we be approaching new scientific claims that maybe on the face of it seems to challenge the biblical account?
Yeah, that's a really great question because Tompkins is an excellent example of this. Evolutionists were satisfied with this explanation, so they never decided to look into it in greater detail. Tompkins was dissatisfied with this explanation, so he actually looked to see what that fusion event looked like, and that's where he saw the real gene, the functional gene working there. So I think whenever we hear something, especially something that's fairly new, evolutionists are willing to make up a story that fits their model, and then they're done. They don't want any more. And it takes real scientists like the creation scientists to actually say, well, let's make sure this story really checks out. And then it doesn't. So I think as Christians, we have to be very skeptical about these evolutionary explanations on the face of them because they just come about too easy and are accepted too easily.
Dr. J. Wile, thank you so much for being on.
My pleasure.
For those wanting to learn more, I would encourage you to check out Dr. Wile's book, Discovering Design with Biology. It's a great resource for understanding science from a biblical perspective. This has been a fascinating discussion. The chromosome 2 fusion event is often presented as proof of evolution, but as we've seen today, the actual evidence is far from conclusive. In fact, there are better alternative explanations that fit within the biblical model. It's time to take a quick break, but we will be right back, so stay tuned. Hi, I'm David Rives, and I'm inviting you to visit the Creation Superstore, the largest Origins-related store in the world. Not only will you find every book and video title on creation versus evolution, science, but also every resource that teaches us about our origin and how it all takes us back to Genesis, a grand designer, the God of the Bible, and ultimately, yes, the gospel message. Documentaries your family can trust, fossils, teaching videos, children's books, church Bible studies, homeschool supplements, and expert scientific literature. If you can't find a title, call us up and we'll add it. Normally, you'd have to visit dozens of sites to gain access to all of the titles that are out there, and then you would be at a loss to whether the book or video was worth the purchase. But not here. We've curated the best of the best into top 10 lists. And on some of my favorite products, you'll find the Rives rating, where I help guide you on the best resources available for not only those who love history, biblical studies, and creation science, but also great products at the layman level, easy to understand for those who are learning or want their children and grandchildren to be exposed to a biblical worldview. Just look for the Rives rating to find my personal favorites. Use the search bar to look up a topic or follow our menu to sort by ministry, subject, or author. Give us a call at 931-212-7990 as you're browsing. We have ministry volunteers who will do their best to assist you at all hours of the day and even help you place your order. Yes, a real person. Get ready for a secure shopping experience brought to you by the leaders of creation-based research. Your purchase goes towards ministry outreach and also supports the authors and organizations who publish the material, most of whom are personal friends and colleagues of mine. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. We are back, and it's time to hear from you, our viewers. Our first viewer voices submission tonight comes from Eileen Turner on Facebook. She says, "This ministry seeks truth and to proclaim it to all who have ears to hear. David is an excellent researcher and brings fascinating facts about God's creation from current and past scientists to us learners." I love it. It's refreshing to hear all of the facts and to not have information misconstrued or missing because it may seem inconvenient. You know, that is a problem that we encounter all the time, Eileen, because the data is there, right? I mean, NASA sends a probe up to space and they bring back a lot of data, but then that data will be interpreted. And the way it is interpreted, it can be misinterpreted or misconstrued just to fit a particular agenda. Now, I'll admit, obviously, Eileen, of course, I have faith that the Bible is true. So when I see this data and I see that it actually can align with the biblical perspective, I'm going to tell you that. But I'm also going to be honest about it. And that's something that a lot of times there is such an agenda-driven system when it comes to the secular scientific world that it's kind of refreshing to have a view that is not biased towards the atheistic. So thank you again for that. Our second testimonial comes from Andrew Itzen, who had this to say after visiting the Wonder Center. He said, "Our group had an amazing visit today. The planetarium shows were fantastic and the displays in the rooms were super informational. It's also nice because they have a lot of stuff for younger kids to interact with." Thank you so much for that comment. Yes, we do have a ton of kids' hands-on activities, more being added on a monthly basis. And then at the same time, there's so much for adults who say, you know what, our kids, our 5-year-old, our 2-year-old, they've been entertained all day long. They've been learning some things. They've been going on the scavenger hunt and all of that. But at the same time, we've been able to absorb a ton of information and actually read the plaques and actually learn this at a more intellectual level, which is really exciting. Now, if you've been impacted by the work that this ministry is doing, I want to hear from you. Please connect with us on social media or email comments@genesissciencenetwork.com. Now it's time to shift our focus to the Big Bang. Does it really explain the origin of the universe? Well, on this week's Genesis Science Minute, we're looking at what science and Scripture says about the beginnings of our universe. Let's take a look right now. Good scientific theories make predictions based on data that is observable and repeatable. That does not describe the common atheistic view of the Big Bang. In fact, far from it. The Big Bang is science fiction and does not address the question of origin. It only proposes a theory that attempts to explain the apparent expansion of the universe. On the other hand, Scripture describes its origin, the creation of the universe, and its expansion long ago. Isaiah chapter 40 says that God stretched out the heavens. The development of the universe is clearly described in the book of Genesis. It states that God formed all the matter in the universe only thousands of years ago, placing it in order, a careful design by an infinite designer. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.
For more information, visit David Rives Ministries at davidrives.com, davidrives.com.
And now it's time to jump into this week's ministry report. We recently had the opportunity to sit down with Michael Mahan for a special episode of Wonders Without Number. Michael has a passion for wildlife education, and in our conversation we explored some of the incredible creatures that point to the brilliance of God's design. Now, one of the fascinating moments from our discussion was when he introduced to us an eclectus parrot, a tropical bird with strikingly different colorations between males and females, a feature that puzzled early scientists for years. Here's a clip from our conversation.
I was like, God is so powerful and gracious, and I love looking at his creation.
And I love it too. You've brought some of his creation today, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
What do you have?
So first, I brought a parrot, and this is a really cool species of parrot. His name is Buddy. Let's see if we can get him out here. Hey, Buddy, come on. Oh, there he is. So this is Buddy.
Hey, Buddy.
Hey, and
oh, look at this. This is Buddy. What is he? What type of bird?
Buddy is an eclectus parrot.
An eclectus parrot.
Yeah, and they're found in Australia, like northern Australia, and the
Okay.
Solomon Islands, New Guinea.
Okay.
And they're a tropical rainforest bird, and they are really incredible. They have so many super unique things to the bird world right here.
Oh my goodness, and look at the color of those feathers there, that bright green mixed with the blue.
Yeah. When they fly, you can see this like light blue on the shoulders and dark blue down the wing.
Wow.
And then they also have all this red underneath their wing.
Really?
And it is absolutely incredible. You can see a little bit of that red right
Oh, I
there.
see a little bit of the red there.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so eclectus, how do you say it one more time?
Eclectus.
Eclectus parrot.
Parrot,
Okay. Okay, tell me a little bit more about these birds.
So one of the biggest features, most parrots, the males and females look very similar.
Okay.
But these exhibit extreme sexual dimorphism.
Okay.
So the males and the females look completely different. The females are red and purple.
Really?
And the males are this really bright green with that candy corn beak.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Look at him.
Really cool.
So this is an example of what the males versus the females look like right here.
Yes. And so for the first 100 years that the Europeans settled in the area that these birds are found, they thought they were different species.
I mean, obviously, they're so different.
Yeah, they look nothing alike, which is really incredible.
That was so fun. I love it when we actually bring live animals on set. It's something that we actually do regularly here at the Wonders Center because there's always something going on, whether there's a school group walking by, looking through the window at our filmings or whatever. And then we have the Wonders of Zoology, which is actually down the East Wing with all of these live animals. And so actually just pulling some out from there from time to time and bringing them on set is really fun. But you can watch this full interview right now by visiting creationsuperstore.com. We have this available for digital download. We've got it on your old school DVDs. However you want it, we've got it. And many, many more episodes of Wonders Without Number. So look it up right now. The prayers and generosities of our viewers continues to make all of this possible. Your monthly support, it helps ensure that we can continue to share the wonders of God's creation with individuals all over the globe including the gospel message, because ultimately looking at those, an eclectus parrot, for instance, shows us beauty, it shows us design, it shows us a world that is absolutely tailored for life, and that life includes you. You're made in God's image. He loves you. He wants to have a relationship with you. It ultimately leads us back to the gospel and back to Jesus Christ. We want you to partner with us in ministry. You can make a tax-deductible contribution. Please continue to pray for us. You can visit our website or you can call 931-212-7990 today to donate and to learn more about our work. Next, we're diving into this week's Heavens Declare, where we explore Venus, one of the brightest objects in our sky. So what makes this planet so unique? And why did Jesus refer to himself as the morning star? Let's take a look right now. The planet that we call Venus has such a special place in our solar system that it appears Jesus himself refers to it as a symbol of his own majesty. I, Jesus, am the root and the offspring of David and the bright and morning star. It has intrigued us since ancient times, and even today it remains a planet of fascination and mystery. Now, you may recall from your astronomy classes that the Earth is the third planet out from the Sun. Venus is the second. So its smaller orbit keeps it always on the sunny side of our view. This is why the farthest that we ever see it from sunrise or sunset is just 3 hours, making the titles Morning and Evening Star a perfect fit for Venus. Venus is the third brightest object that we can see in space. Of course, there's no competition for the sun, since it provides practically all of the light in our neighborhood. And then the moon is so close that it has an easy time shining on us. Next comes Venus, our closest planetary neighbor, and even nearer than the sun. This alone helps it shine well. But then we add the fact that Venus, its thick atmosphere reflects about 70% of the sunlight. As a comparison, the moon reflects no more than 12% of sunlight hitting it. Now, if it was as reflective as Venus, we probably would never get to sleep during a full moon. There are so many fascinating things about studying Venus. I don't have time to touch on all of them today, but I'll share just one of the earliest. You see, civilizations have recorded their observations of Venus and its motion as far back as post-Babel Sumerians. But it was with the invention of the telescope that the era of modern scientific discovery began. Galileo was the very first to turn his newly built telescope to Venus, and his observations became part of his case for changing the way that Western scientists viewed the universe. It had become popular to assume that the Earth was somehow fixed in space and at the exact center of the universe. Complex equations helped to make sense of the way that planets and the sun changed position in our sky. But some observations, they were really difficult to fit with this model. Then, Galileo was able to observe the phases of Venus. Just like our moon, Venus doesn't reflect sunlight from the entire side facing towards us. If you think about it, the only time we would see a full Venus would be when it's on the far side of the sun from us. And then we would have to observe it in daylight. So the times that we can clearly observe Venus, it glows in either a crescent or a half circle shape. So these discoveries weren't enough to convince everybody right away, but Galileo's observations were the first clear evidence that Venus was circling the sun rather than the Earth. And it began to break European astronomy free from this man-made inflexibility. Just a few more interesting facts about one of the most fascinating objects in the night sky. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. Looking through a telescope, seeing God's creation, seeing the universe, so inspiring. So up next, a recent article claims that dinosaur fossils were the real nail in the coffin for Christianity. But hey, is that really the case, or does the fossil record actually affirm biblical history? Paleontologist Joseph Hubbard joins us after the break to separate fact from fiction. Stay tuned. Tune in to the Genesis Science Network Knowledge Block as you learn real, cutting-edge science, not evolutionary theories and agendas. Whether you're in junior or senior high, a homeschooler, or an adult looking for higher education, we bring you a fresh perspective each weekday. Our goal is to equip you with another block to build and strengthen your faith, giving you solid evidence. Join us each weekday at 11 a.m. Central. I want to thank you for supporting GSN this year. Your support is helping us send this broadcast to millions of households around the globe. You know, in a society where the theories of Darwinian evolution are bombarding our youth via schools and universities and through peer pressure, we need to saturate the airwaves with the truth of real biblical science, and you are making this happen. Your one-time, monthly, or generous end-of-year tax-deductible love gift keeps this network streaming 24/7 at no cost to our viewers. Thank you for your support. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. Is there a biblical view of animal rights?
We've actually got a report that was in one of our British newspapers a little while back. Don't kill mosquitoes, let them take blood donation. Now here's a great example of being futile in your thinking, right?
Right.
At what point should we be looking after animals? At what point should we be treating animals as if they were humans? So it's a really popular topic.
On Wonders Without Number. Welcome back to the report. History is full of pivotal moments, events that supposedly changed the way people saw the world forever. Now, some claim that when Copernicus proposed that the Earth orbits the Sun, it shattered religious belief. Others say, well, Darwin's Origin of Species forced people to abandon creation entirely. But now a recent article suggests that the real turning point, it wasn't a book or a discovery about the stars. No, it was actually the unearthing of dinosaur fossils. The claim that dinosaurs, that the bones buried in the ground, well, they did more to discredit the Bible than any scientist ever could. Now, the argument, well, it's kind of simple. The moment people realized that creatures existed and then they went extinct, they supposedly began questioning everything from Genesis to Noah's Ark to the very idea of a creator. But is that really what happened? Or does the fossil record itself actually affirm the biblical timeline rather than contradict it? To help us dig into this claim, both historically and scientifically, we're joined by Joseph Hubbard in England. He has experience in paleontology, geology, and is the Director of Creation Research UK. Joseph has studied fossils firsthand all over the world to document the evidence of biblical history in the fossil record. And we've done some traveling together in this pursuit. Joseph, welcome back to the show.
It's good to be back, David. It's good to see you, and it's good to be on the show again.
And you're not in the UK right now. You are actually in the States traveling.
I am indeed. We've been going for the last sort of 2.5 weeks. We've got about another 2 weeks to go, and I'll be coming over to see you in the Wonder Centre and everything in a week or so's time. So I'm looking forward to that.
Maybe we'll have to pull you back in studio and do something together while you're here. This recent article, it's really strange. It argues that the discovery of dinosaur fossils was actually the nail in the coffin for Christianity. What's your response to that claim?
It's strange is one way of describing it. It's a very short article. It's only a few paragraphs long, 3-minute read according to MSN. I have to say, if I'm going to be blunt, it's some of the worst journalism I've seen in quite a while. The author sort of showcases an astonishing lack of knowledge and reasoning, both when it comes to an understanding of science and history and the progression of scientific thought. And it struggles to have any kind of original thought, because what this article is is it's based off of another article written in The Atlantic, right, the magazine The Atlantic, which itself was just a review of 2 recently published books. So number one, be careful where you get your news and information from, right? Because so often misconstrued and false conclusions are produced in these sort of secondary source news articles. And everybody ought to be aware and wary of this, that not everything that we read is necessarily accurate. And if we spent as much time as we needed to go through the article and to just pick up all of the not just false arguments or madly wide conclusions, even if we were just to go through and sort of pick up all the mistakes, we could be here for an hour quite easily, right? And case in point, the article claims that in the history of destroying religion, the whole article is very anti-God, very anti-religion, and it claims that in the history of destroying religion, interestingly, the author says religion, but only ever references the Bible. So it's fairly clear which religion they're going after, right? But the claim is, as you said earlier, the single most important turning point is, quote, the discovery of dinosaur bones. And the quote continues, that's right, in one moment in 1811, upended the received wisdom more than any other, and it did almost overnight. The discovery of prehistoric fossils, largely in Britain, challenged long-held theological and scientific assumptions about nature and humankind's place in it.
Yeah.
That the Bible was to be taken literally and that the world was made a mere 6,000 years before. Now, that comment, right, 1811, that one moment in 1811, it's a bizarre comment, and I spent quite a bit of time last night thinking through it, because the first recognized dinosaur was discovered in 1820, not in 1811. It was given a name about a year later, and the name dinosaur then wasn't invented until 1841 by Richard Owen, right? And both the discoverer of the first ever dinosaur, Iguanodon, from the UK, and the namer of the Iguanodon dinosaur and the word dinosaur in general, Sir Richard Owen, both of them believed in the Bible, both of them believed in creation, and both of them believed in Noah's flood. So while we could spend forever, going through the article and picking it to pieces, I'm not going to do that. What we're going to do is just look at 2 main points that both this article and the article it's sort of based on are really trying to get across. The first one is that the idea that modern science destroys the Bible, which is really where this idea of dinosaurs getting rid of, religion is sort of coming from. But secondly, you can then go into the science side of stuff and the history side of stuff, which is the idea that it was the discovery of dinosaurs that destroyed the belief in the Bible. Now, the thing that I found most ironic about the whole article is that in this sort of, they're trying to make it sound sort of cool, when was the point that religion was destroyed? And they said a moment where the species saw the truth of the matrix and there was no going back. Near the beginning of the article, and then they list things like Copernicus's discovery that the Earth orbited the sun, the invention of the printing press, the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution, Isaac Newton's laws of motions. And all of these people and all of these eras of history, if you like, all birthed out of not only a belief, or not only by people who believed in the Bible and believed in creation, they did so because they believed in the Bible, believed in creation, believed in absolute truth, believed in absolute morality, and believed that God was a God of law and order.
Yeah.
And that's a really important point, that modern science birthed out of a belief in the scriptures. Particularly, if you want to take it one step further, it was birthed out of the Reformation, right? The idea of getting rid of old superstition, coming back to the Bible, sola scripture. So in the beginning, God created. The world went from good to bad to worse because of man's sin. And we can see the evidence of this in the world around us. And even though it's a fallen world, we have inherent, not just necessarily value, but inherent trustworthiness, if you like, in the world around us, because Romans chapter 1, verse 20, God has stamped his nature onto creation so you can trust the world. So, she even admits, the author, that you've got this, this coming out of religion almost, or certainly a belief in the scriptures specifically, that actually gave birth to modern science. And then we get onto the issue of dinosaurs. the point here is that it's not about, science versus the Bible. It's truth versus error. And you've dealt with this many times, David. We've done it on the show. You've had some great people. We could go in and talk about dinosaurs, evidence of them being buried very rapidly all over the world, evidence of soft tissue that show that they can't be millions of years old, dinosaurs that have clearly been drowned and fossilized and buried all over the world. So lots and lots and lots of evidence that dinosaurs are not the nail in religion's coffin, but in fact they actually go one step further and show that you can trust the Bible from the beginning. And I'd encourage your viewers to check out the evidence that you can find when it comes to dinosaurs.
Yeah.
But this sort of question of historical, or a question of history really, where it says that where did this idea of millions of years come from? Now, the article rightly equates, I think, that the rejection of Christianity really started around this issue of what we perceive today to be science. I would take issue with it being dinosaurs for two reasons. Number one, as I mentioned earlier, most of the people who were working on dinosaur study, certainly in the early days, were all Bible-believing Christians. And in fact, many of them were trained in the church. Many of them were trained for the clergy. So the Reverend William Fox, who has more dinosaurs named after him than any other person, right? He worked as a church minister, and he would go out on the Isle of Wight and dig up dinosaur fossils and all sorts, right?
Yeah.
And so many of this sort of early start of dinosaurs came from this idea, this point of view, this worldview of a creation worldview. But the idea of millions of years, which we now mostly, in certainly lay people's minds, mostly associate with dinosaurs, mainly because dinosaurs have become so popular, right? You think of the films and the movies and stuff, and 65 million years in the making, right? So today, many people equate dinosaurs automatically with millions of years. They equate Jurassic automatically with millions of years. But the point is, the idea of millions of years came way, way before dinosaurs. Yep. And you've got the likes of Charles Lyell, who influenced Charles Darwin. His aim was to get rid of God out of people's thinking. He freely admitted it. My aim is to free science from Moses. He borrowed from not only people like James Hutton, who came sort of 30 to 40 years before you had any kind of idea of these dinosaurs existing. He promoted the idea that the Earth was millions of years old. Slow and gradual processes produce all the rocks around us. He didn't come up with those ideas. They were borrowed from the French revolutionaries that borrowed them from the old Greeks. And hey, we've done a whole program on this together, right? Yep. But it just shows you that there's a fundamental flaw in simply equating the discovery of dinosaurs with the death of religion, particularly, or especially, if you like, the death of Christianity. The two just don't equate together.
No, they don't.
So,
Joe,
go back and do a bit more digging.
No, absolutely. We're completely out of time, but you're correct. Humankind's move from superstition to science, it's actually been the reverse. We've moved from real science into superstitious beliefs in this magical ingredient of time and nature. For those who want to learn more, make sure you check out Joseph Hubbard's work at Creation Research UK, where he provides real-world evidence that supports the biblical account of history. Thank you so much for being on the program, and that is it for today. I want to thank you for joining us on the Genesis Science Report. Until next week, keep looking up. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.